It was incredible. I was like, this is engaging climbing. This is really, and of course the sun rises, as you're like on the ridge, you start seeing the whole Himalaya range and there's no wind. You're almost too hot. It's like, oh my gosh, it was just, you couldn't dream of that quality of a day. That was, that was a treat.
Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Keykeper. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us.
Welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. This is episode 32. On today's episode, we've got an awesome conversation with Mike Pond, an Alpenglow mountain guide who just had his first experience on Mount Everest with Alpenglow's team. So we got to catch up with Mike after returning, and he had some great things to say. We learned a bit about his career and his thoughts on Everest after the first time going to the Himalaya, honestly. So really great conversation with Mike. But first,
terrible. We fired him.
Yeah. He does still have a job.
We recorded the episode.
You fired him on the podcast. It's really good. You should definitely stick around and listen. AB, how's it going?
It's going great. I mean, it is full on summer here, which is lovely and fun and wonderful. Tahoe's getting busy, but I'm mostly a fan of that. Actually, we might talk a little bit about this in my news item. So that's all great, but I literally feel like I haven't slept in 6 days between like some awesome work stuff, so much playing because it's so amazing here, and then so many friends coming through town, and like it's tough, Sam, all those social obligations, but like it's been a phenomenal week. I've been lucky enough to have the grandparents in town, Emily's parents, helping with Arrow, childcare, things like that. Emily was away for 10 days, but got back from Europe. And we're just cranking. How about you?
Chaos. Well, I'm T-minus 10 days from the due date for our second child. So I feel you on the chaos front. I feel like I've been like deep cleaning, went to Costco today, went to Target today, kind of doing the last minute prep stuff. Maybe not as much playing as you've had lately, but all good stuff. And yeah, we're getting ready for baby number 2. So I'll be stepping away from some of these upcoming episodes, but I'll be back. That's for sure.
Dang, I will stop complaining about how full life is with one kid. It's like what I used to complain about how full life was with a dog. And before that, I complained about how full life was with a business. And now we've got the business and the dog and the one kid. But from everyone I've watched going through it, that second little one kind of throws a new wrench in the mix.
I mean, the reality is you rise to the occasion, right? So it is what it is, and it's going to be...
you do or you don't, Sam.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to rise to the occasion. It's going to be wild, and I'm totally ready for that wildness. And, I'll be hitting you up to do some, toddler play dates for, my own self entertainment.
Absolutely. Well, Wally's just a great kid and seems to be doing so well. And I know you guys will totally excel with number 2. I look forward to seeing your process.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. You'll be hearing soon enough.
And yeah, so Duffel Shuffle, I think people can expect we have some episodes in the can, so ready to sort of cover some of your time away. And I think we might experiment a little bit with co-hosts and maybe even me solo hosting. We'll just see what the next couple of months brings and how soon you feel like having adult multi-hour conversation again that we record for the public. But
I'll probably be super eager. The better question is, how soon will my wife be ready for me to step away for 2 hours?
Exactly. Totally fair. And we're so lucky that we actually get to prioritize our families and those things and really put time into, this amazing chapter that you have coming up. But the podcast plans on continue to release every 2 weeks on. Do our episodes release on Wednesday?
Tuesday night,
Tuesday.
Wednesday morning.
See, you can tell I don't actually produce this thing. I'm sure everyone knows that. But so we're going to try to really hard to stay on schedule. We have a great team with our editor and coordinator, Rob, who does a lot of our social and things. So hope everyone stays in it. And Sam, you'll be missed. The episodes might be like 7 hours long now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. It's going to be episode 33, part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for the next 5 weeks.
Just don't let me bring on any of my like great close friends from my time in the Himalaya, and we'll be fine.
Exactly. Well, on that note, what do you got for this week?
Oh, I mean, I think my news for this week, I was trying to think about like what's happening in the industry. And a fun thing is that the first thing that came to mind, the one thing I wanted to talk about is kind of like a news item that also crosses over to my personal world here in Tahoe. So this week in Tahoe has been this trail running like fiesta because last weekend we had the Broken Arrow Sky Race, this fantastic series of races put on by Brendan Madigan along with a few other friends. They started the Broken Arrow Sky Race series 6, 7, 8 years ago. I've run all the different distances at this point, although I didn't run or race this year. But that race has turned into, I think, let's say 1,000 participants over the 3 days of races, loads of brands out here, super high energy. It's now an important race in the sort of like race series that get people to be able to, step up and go to more, other events and things like that. So that kicked off the week. Then we had TrailCon, a new event put on by Brenda Madigan and friends. That's a little bit more of like an industry look, brands, media, athletes gathering to spend 2 days kind of like talking about the industry of trail running, everything from races to sponsored athletes. And the sport is growing so fast. And so they were hosting panels talking about, some of the different challenges of the sport as well as opportunities of the sport. There were loads of activations by different running brands. It was just this super busy few days. And then it sort of culminates with the oldest 100-mile race in the United States, I believe, the Western States 100, which is always in late June and always starts from the base of Palisades. But all of this together has just made like my favorite mountain in the world, Palisades Ski Resort, just feel like this hub and center of trail running. And trail running for me has never been my primary sport, but it's of course, the primary way I train when there's not snow on the ground. I love it so much and the simplicity of it. It truly still is this thing for me. It is the simplest thing I do. It's getting more and more techy and there's more and more devices people carry. And you could spend a lot of money now on poles and lighting and running vests. And turns out I shouldn't, wear the same pair of shoes for 3 years. And people are, you're buying new shoes all the time. But you could take all of that away and just throw on a pair of clapped out running shoes and go outside on a trail. And I just love the simplicity of it so much. And I love that it feels like it is just having its moment out there because of legends like Kilian Jornet, because of young runners coming in. Yeah, it's just really exciting. And it also meant for me that we just had this like huge number of friends coming through town. So, that ties into like my joy of the event. Like it is ultimately for me all about community and the people I get to share these things with. It also connects to why I feel like I haven't slept in 8 days and my eyes and voice are really tired because I've been like yelling and screaming at my friends for days. And I'm also, I think, super dehydrated. But I was with some of the executives from Palisades over the last 2 days at an event that Alpenglow Expeditions was actually hosting, a media camp that we kind of piggybacked on all of these other events. We knew there would be great journalists in town, so we hosted them for 3 days of climbing and Via Ferrata and trail running, of course, and hiking and dinners and slideshows. We flew Carla and Topo in to tell Everest stories. And it was just this like incredible week of energy, stoke, reminders for me of why we work so hard and why we do these things. And the executives at Palisades, it was just so wild for them to be like, we are the hub or one of the hubs of trail running in the United States. And 15 years ago, 18 years ago, when I moved here, the Western States was here, but I don't remember Palisades like really thinking it was like so amazing. And how could they help support trail running or build more trails? Or, they now have a trail map of, all the trail running over the resort. And it clicked for me that like they see it too. Like this is exciting and there's so much potential for more. So just fired up for trail running, fired up for where we live and for this great community I get to play in.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, this 10-day period that you mentioned is unique, and it hasn't always been this way. There's always been trail running, and I think it's kind of like mountain sports. Like people in the sports that we do have always kind of been into trail running, but not super into it. And I think that trail running itself is having a moment. And you see ski mountaineers like Cody Townsend getting into trail running. You see, top alpinists showing their trail runs. And it's cool to see that trail running is such a big part of the sports we do in an indirect way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit of an addition to what we talk about regularly. And yeah, we've been playing the game. Like you see a runner on the side of the street and it's like, are they here for the races or do they live here? Like,
right.
Because it really does bring out this really unique 10-day period with these races and these events, and you can sense it around town. I mean, even obviously you go to the valley, you go to Olympic Valley where Palisades is, and it is a trail running mecca right now. But you go to Tahoe City, you go to Truckee, and you see a lot of the kind of like peripheral trail running in those areas, and it's just really fun to see. And I'm really into mountain biking right now, but I have noticed the trail running, and it makes me excited for doing some running as well.
Yeah, we were even out on Donna Summer today, which is far away from the valley, 20 minutes, and we did a 7-mile loop. We saw at least a dozen runners that may or may not be pros, but are fully kitted out in like very smartly chosen equipment. You can just see when someone's passionate about trail running instead of they're like kind of a climber doing their 3 miles or something like that. Yeah, it's great energy. And same thing driving through Tahoe City an hour ago. Like the streets are just filled by people who clearly like to run and wear short shorts. And it's awesome.
Absolutely.
So what do you have, Sam? You're I brought the scene up. Now just bring us down. Come on.
Oh, well, you went for the easy, like fun loving topic. And I think we'd be remiss without mentioning the public lands for sale right now, or the discussion around public lands being for sale. Obviously, it's a hot topic and I don't really want to get political on this, but I do have a couple thoughts.
I love it.
I think, one, I'm going to just start out with like a little bit of a rant on Instagram activism. You're familiar with this topic, right?
Yes.
I think we live in a world where it's really fun to just share something on Instagram and not do research behind it. And these hot political topics deserve research, and they deserve creating and forming your own opinion. And whether you're for certain things or against certain things, I think it's really important to do your own research. And I'm seeing tons of accurate information out there. And I'm also seeing tons of inaccurate information out there. And it kind of bums me out because we live in a world where like information is important and accurate information is important. And if you're sharing something, you should share something that you have checked and is accurate. I'll say that I listened to an awesome podcast that kind of broke a couple things down called the Your Mountain podcast. And they had an episode on June 13th. It was episode 200. And it was super helpful in like understanding some of the details. Obviously, the hot topic is that 3 million acres of public lands are for sale. Since that was first announced, I believe it got dropped. The U.S. Forest Service land got pulled out. It's now BLM land, about 1.2 million acres, a lot less, but still a significant amount of public land. I'm not going to necessarily take a stance on whether that land should be for sale or not, because that's not my place on this podcast. But I will say that I think it's important to understand some of the finer details, because 1.2 million acres is not just like one chunk of land. It's little pieces picked from across the West where there's lots and lots of public land. They're trying to find pieces of land from near population centers so that those population centers can expand. And I think my second kind of point on this topic is that in the United States, I think it would be hard to find someone that would disagree with the fact that we have a housing crisis. There are not enough homes for the number of citizens that we have or the number of people living in the United States, and more homes need to be built. Now, where those homes get built is a topic that I'm not going to land on here. But homes and, home prices are determined by supply and demand. And right now we have an issue with supply and demand. Our supply is too low for the demand. And therefore, in these mountain towns, these towns that we love so much, our home prices have gone up. Now, there's certainly a lot of other factors like extreme wealth and second homeowners that is a separate topic. But I think if you live in a mountain town and you feel like you're getting pushed out of that mountain town and priced out of that mountain town, consider what might happen if there is increased supply in those areas of homes. Now, I'm not necessarily trying to say that I believe all this public land is going to be sold into small portions and there's going to be homes built on those small lots and then they're going to be sold to locals in the area. Like that's a much more complicated conversation that we're not having on this lovely Duffel Shuffle podcast. But I think it's just important to understand the details and kind of dive in. And if you really care about something, do your research and then make your opinion and form your own opinion and voice that opinion. The other thing I will say is if you do oppose certain things that are happening politically, reach out to your senators because it is very obviously in this instance effective. That original proposal that had 3 million acres of public land for sale was reduced to 1.2 million acres of BLM land because people reached out to their senators. And that was an effective strategy in combating the initial sale of public land. So I don't know if I brought up news or I just stirred the pot a little bit there, but I think it's a really interesting time that we're living in. And this one hits home, and a lot of our brands and colleagues and people in the industry have been posting about it, which is awesome. And it's super important. But I think it's also important to recognize what are we reposting? What are we circulating? And what are the finer details around that?
Yeah, I love that. Hot take from Sam Kiekeffer on the Duffel Shuffle podcast. No, I mean, I think your point is a really good one, that these issues, this being a great example, is one that hits close to our community. And therefore, of course, our community wants to speak to it. At the same time, it is really easy to, I think one of the challenges in our politics right now is going to the hyper extreme of any issue. If we do this, then this incredibly awful thing happens. And I would like to, in general, turn down the temperature of the way we discuss difficult issues. And this was a great example of that. I think after doing my research, I am happy to take a stand that this is not the way I want to see public land sold. I think, for me, I want public lands protected to the greatest degree possible. At the same time, one use of public lands will be things like mining, logging, recreation, and potentially, if we grow enough as a country, and perhaps we have today, more housing through swaps or sales or whatever it might be. But to do that should be incredibly well and carefully thought out. Why, where, how? As I understand it, the largest reason for this public land sell-off was basically to try to, balance this budget so it works through reconciliation, balance this bill. And the idea that a one-time payoff of selling land is going to help our deficit or debt or any of that is so ridiculously stupid. And so I really felt like this is just not the way. At the same time, I don't want to see us using facts that just aren't true. To your point that we're gonna clickbait that we're we're selling off all of Tahoe, we're selling off all our favorite backcountry skiing, I understand how you can look at a piece of the information that went out there and said, well, that is BLM or Forest Service land, therefore that's for sale. It's not that direct. I do think we need to be very careful to not just open the floodgates to whatever someone chooses, but that's where the details matter. That's where nuance matters. And that's where actually sitting down in a room as politicians working together matters. And when we're extreme, I think that becomes harder and harder to do. With that said, I'm against this bill the way it was written, and I'm glad it's being just fucking ripped apart. And I in no way believe this solves either our deficit issue, nor do I believe that it solves any of our housing issue. Like, if this was a policy tied to we're only going to build high density, housing close to public transportation, and that happens to be BLM land, I would love to see that proposal. Chances are the BLM land and Forest Service land, like, it's unlikely that it's next to public transportation and a great place for high density housing that could actually help our housing crisis. It's unfortunately, again, this is where my brain goes when I'm being extreme. It's like that land seems like it might be a lot better for a $10 million mansion with a ranch out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm pretty sure that's not where I want any focus of addressing the housing crisis to go. So again, I'm not in the room having those conversations, and that's where I really agree with you, Sam. But like you spoke to, as a member of Protect Our Winters, like this idea of the outdoor state and us kind of coming together, I do think the right move was to come together, shut this down, but hopefully also say, and we are open to discussing appropriate ways to move forward in our housing crisis and with our public lands, which I don't believe should be inviolable, like never to be touched in any circumstance, in any situation, anywhere in the United States. I think it's entirely possible our country one day has 1 billion people in it, like as a population total. Maybe not in my lifetime, but one day. We have to be willing to discuss solutions of how to grow as a country. Same thing I say with, like, I want more people skiing or playing in the backcountry or going to the surf break, even though it makes my play harder. I feel the same way about more people moving to these places. It makes it harder, but we need to come up with solutions around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I align with you on all that. And, it's interesting what you just made me think about is like, are you opposing something specific or are you opposing a precedent that's being set? And those are two very different things. And both are dangerous, right? But I think it's important to acknowledge what the opposition is to, and don't oppose a precedent with specifics. You need to oppose a precedent. You need to address that you're opposing a precedent, or you need to address that you're opposing specific bills or proposals or whatever. And both have their flaw or their challenges, but being specific, not just reposting a graphic on Instagram, is kind of what I'm getting at here. So
I hear you. Turns out social media is still a terrible place to have nuanced debate. Unfortunately, in many cases, it's the only place any debate's happening at all.
Yep. But yeah,
Can we go talk about Mount Everest now?
Yeah, exactly. We're done. No, the Your Mountain podcast, shout out. I think they did a great job at like kind of breaking down some of the high level topics behind this bill and, talking about the facts and not just like opposing it and not discussing it. Cause I think you're right. We do need to, concede in some places, and we need to like find a balance. The really, really aggressive swing is getting to the point where we're going to do a loop-de-loop. And if you do a loop-de-loop on a swing, it's all bad, right?
Yeah. I've never tried, but I can imagine.
Awesome. Well, yeah, like we said earlier, we have an awesome interview with Mike Pond coming up. We hope you all enjoy it, and we'll talk to you soon, Adrian.
Sounds good, Sam. Good luck with what's coming up. We'll be watching.
Thanks. Welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. This is episode 32, and today we've got a good friend of ours as a guest on the podcast, Mike Pond. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me.
So Mike and I first met in June of 2020. Wonderful time of our lives. Wild, weird time of our lives. And Mike was a mountain guide moving to the area and reached out and connected, and it was kind of a funny time in that Alpenglow wasn't hiring, and Mike knocked on the door and, I think at first we kind of brushed his email off, and then all of a sudden someone had a look at it and it was like, oh, interesting. This guy actually has like some really legit experience. Maybe we should talk to him. And had a meeting with Mike, and Mike kind of like was offered the opportunity to come do some Via Ferrata guiding, very chill experience. And all of a sudden, Mike's like going around the world for Alpenglow Expedition, guiding expeditions. And he's been to Bolivia and Ecuador and Peru and Argentina, Aconcagua, and now most recently Mount Everest. And so Mike's little email that he sent in June of 2020, not expecting much, has really progressed into an awesome friendship and relationship with us here at Alpenglow. And so, Mike, we're excited to hear about your path and experience, and hear about your experience on Mount Everest. I think you have this interesting perspective, having just been to Mount Everest for the first time, and we're excited to dive in.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, yeah, that it was like, well, I know this is a funny time to be looking for a job, but hey, maybe I could work a couple days a month and keep myself sane after lockdown and stuff. And then, yeah, but in the season, I was working like basically full time, and I was doing Sierra trips and all that stuff. And then, yeah, and then the expedition doors opened up back again, and like 10 expeditions later, yeah.
And here we are. So, Mike, how did you get into the mountains originally? Like, we'd love to hear kind of your path to climbing and guiding, and hear a little bit about what brought you to the mountains and what still draws you in today.
Yeah, yeah. So I got introduced to the outdoors through Boy Scouts. I grew up in kind of the suburbs in New York City, going up to the Adirondack Mountains for the big adventures, and started doing canoe trips for a week with the Boy Scouts, and then that turned into hiking out in the Scout Ranch out in New Mexico. I did like 5 trips out there as a teenager. I was flying out to New Mexico and up to 20-day trips there, which got me just addicted to adventure, I think. So I owe a lot to the Boy Scouts. I still, yeah, super foundational for me. And then in college, I was actually a music major for 2 years. That kind of fell through. And then at the time, my younger brother was looking at this major called Expeditionary Studies up in SUNY Plattsburgh, State University of New York, in the furthest north town of Plattsburgh and before you hit Canada. And they have a Bachelor of Science degree of, yeah, it's called Expeditionary Studies, but basically it's like you learn the technical skills of climbing, ice climbing, rock climbing, skiing or kayaking, sea kayaking and whitewater. And you kind of choose your focus among all those, but you get exposed to it all. I did a study abroad. Well, I did study abroad to like Mexico normal style, but my main study abroad was a 3-month semester course in Canmore from the AMGA mountain guides, which blew my mind. And also like it catapulted the progression. Like the guides are like Sarah Hunikin, Grant Meekin, Steve Halatesy, like these crusher guides and climbers and stuff. Climbed a couple days with Ian Wellstead, like just gonna be PL8 winners, right? So anyway, like, and then the following summer, well, the summer before I graduated college, I got a job in Bellingham with the American Institute and started guiding up there. So drove my Honda Accord cross country, got incompletes in a bunch of my semester courses and stuff, and then was on Mount Baker the next week, and then spent 7 years with them.
All right, we need to pause before we continue. So first of all, is the SUNY Plattsburgh program, does this still exist? Expeditionary Studies? I know there's probably a lot of listeners out there
It
like,
does.
oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and actually I just got hit up to like update my bio for the like alumni and stuff. And so yeah, I have like friends and climbing partners who are from that program still. So it's really cool. Upstate New York producing a cadre.
And what is the music major 2 years that didn't work
Yeah,
out? What
yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah, so I was a trumpet player from like 4th grade and got obsessed with it in high school. And yeah, I was like, I want to be a music teacher. And I was like, yeah, I was running track, cross country. I was like, oh yeah, this is a sweet, setup. And then the trumpet instrument is played on your lips, of course, but the lips are actually the instrument. Like you're making all of the sound with your lips, called an embouchure, the muscles you play on. And short answer is like I stopped being able to play well at some day. It was like all of a sudden I was playing more and more, and I was declining in my abilities. It's like causing a nervous breakdown. It's crazy. And somebody equated it to like singing Broadway, I guess, and then trying to, it's just like imperfect musculature, more or less. And then So I tried getting an embouchure change, which is basically like breaking your legs, resetting them, learn how to walk again, all while trying to like up the game and go into college and be a music major and stuff. So I was always like, okay, I was relatively good, but never that good at playing the trumpet. High notes were like my crux for sure. And then eventually it just kind of came to a head where it was like, okay, you could take a couple years off and practice in your parents' basement and then try this again, or you can do something else. And which
Wow.
is kind of a bummer too, because I was a music ed major. I wanted to teach people how to play it, and so they had a really high level performance standards, which I don't disagree with necessarily, but yeah, I didn't cut it in short, and so I failed. And I tried environmental science for a semester, but it wasn't really sticking. And then at the end, yeah, I heard it was like, wait, I can go rock climbing for a college major, and you know, here we are.
Yeah.
And before you made the switch, did you do any rock climbing like in a gym as a kid at birthday parties, or was this like a total there's something about rock climbing that caught your interest yet you had no experience with it?
Yeah. Interesting you asked that. So I did not climb at all. I never climbed until college. I started going to a gym that year that I quit music in the Buffalo Niagara climbing gym, like one of these old school gyms, It's kind of like self. But yeah, my first time actually it was ice climbing the Adirondacks with Boy Scouts, maybe a year previous. And I was running cross country and track. It was pretty good, getting out of it what I put into it, right? You put a lot of work in, you get some results. And I remember climbing, I think I climbed 5'10 like my first day climbing in the gym. And someone was like, wow, you're good at this. And I was like, oh, maybe I should do something that I'm naturally not bad at, like the trumpet. Like it was just uphill battle the whole time. And so it was like, it felt a little more natural.
Well, but this will be the last question about music. But like, do you think that process of working in music and wanting this so badly as a very young child, like, do you think there's some foundational things that came out of that, like learning how to work hard, learning how to practice, learning how to self manage? Like, is it a big piece of who you are today? Do you think?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, totally. Climbing's outside, so I think that's a little better than blasting your ears off in a closet for your life. But although playing with a group of people or singing or something, like I did a whole lot of different types of music and stuff. There's nothing quite like that. It's almost like I've heard it equated, like to be poetic for a minute. Like I've heard it equated to being a part of an organism of sorts. Like all the cells and elements and stuff are disparate, but then you combine to be something that's kind of greater than yourself. Climbing has that a little bit, right? You get team elements of things. You're not like creating art climbing, as a group. So that's something that's been absent in my life, and I don't like that, but I don't have a way to get that back in there. But definitely the concept of, well, first of all, work ethic. I remember my old trumpet teacher said, "Got to practice 3 hours a day, maintain 5 to get better." It's like, okay, like it's bad for the workaholic in me, but it's very good for the dedication, side of things. And but then also like for sure, just creating art mastery, the idea of getting good at something, and then it becomes more like play once you put the work in, get foundational skills, and that's something for sure that's benefited the climbing. The same is true for running. I'd say running cross country and like long distance is very much a kind of a less sexy side of it. Somebody described it once as like 98% hard work and 2% rock star, Um, I might even disagree with the 2% part, but it's kind of that sort of thing, right? Like you got to put a lot of work in, but you do get a lot out of it. And I've certainly gotten that out of climbing for sure. And the technicality too of the especially hard rock climbing, right? It's super technical.
So you went to the Pacific Northwest and you started guiding and you were working up there for 7 seasons. You said, were you mostly on Baker at that point?
The bread and butter was Baker, which you're always eager to get off of Baker because it's like the other stuff in the Cascade Range because you do a lot of Mount Baker. But that said, I got so comfortable on glaciers. It was like, it's like now it's like, oh yeah, glaciers, cool. I've done this. We played on the Cohen Glacier for like years. But yeah, we did 3 to 12 day courses, and it's all educational. Was the company's like lean, and so it was like, yeah, taking people out for 12 day Cascade Range, half on Baker, half somewhere else, that kind of thing. And so you could do a different mountain every trip if you wanted to, so you could really explore the range. And then what I ended up doing is a lot of personal climbing in the Cascades too. And so, especially being young and energetic and nothing else going on, it's like, oh, we got 2 days off. We're climbing for 2 days. And we're going to be super tired at the beginning of this next trip, but then you're going to camp out for 5 days and you recover faster as a 22-year-old. than I do now. That's for sure.
When your rest days are your work days.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah,
Classic mountain guide
yeah,
plan right there.
yeah. Which I still pull that kind of stuff off. But I'm almost 39 now. It's like recover quite as the same.
It
Um,
is true.
yeah, and then the big thing with AI is Denali, and so I was going there my third year guiding, which I now realize is fairly unique. The speed at which you cover terrain and mountains and diversity there was just awesome. You had to be good, you had to be able to handle it, but yeah, it was just incredible. And so yeah, I did 7 or 6 Denali trips back then, and just did one relatively recently. But and then it gets you up to the Alaska range too, right? And so you're climbing with your buddies up there. So that was, I think, another foundational thing was Alaska. Yeah.
And so how did this step go? What came after that 7 years?
Yeah. So I quit guiding. I was tired of getting paid a small guide's wage. I was tired of living in my car. My body was getting kind of beat up after kind of nonstop climbing trips. Of course, on your seasons off, you're like going to Indian Creek and Yosemite and stuff, right? So it's rad, but I was ready to become an adult. I didn't know how to do that, really. Maybe should have gotten a different guiding job, perhaps, which I kind of regret. But anyway, I did IT recruiting with my dad for 5 years. I thought that's what I was going to do forever.
Plot twist.
Didn't know really. Yeah, logical step from being a climbing guide, right?
There was more art in it, right? That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what drew you
totally.
to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, super corporate. Yeah, it was funny as I was remote. I was in Washington, and in my van, I guess, working off my laptop, and I put my collared shirt on and would Zoom people, like, or Skype at the time, with my back to like the paneling in my van. So they thought I was like in a weird office.
We've done a lot of podcasts that way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you just get a boring back. And now you have Zoom, the abilities of the background a little better. And we were New York based, IT based. Yeah, and I think it made me an adult in a big way, which is really cool. Earned some better money. The money never really came that I hoped it would come. I think it would have come if I had moved to a city and dedicated to it. But honestly, I was not willing to do that. For me, it was a job that would support the lifestyle. So I climbed my tail off. I went to chamois skiing trips and stuff, and upped my game technical climbing. Started climbing 512 because I was climbing in the gym a lot and got a coach and stuff. So I had the consistency there too. But the job itself, my dad was incredibly supportive. He'd done that for years and he was looking for a change. And so we kind of created our own company. Had a couple of people working for us at some point, but it's basically me and him was the core of it. But yeah, it kind of set me up really well, actually, as far as like getting a little bit of savings, healed up my body a bit, like kind of changed gears. Was able to hold down a relationship. My wife and I started dating during that time. So she was going to school in Wisconsin. And so I'd go visit her. I would actually be able to work there, instead of if I was guiding, it'd be a little harder. Got Lyme disease for there, a stint there. So I was kind of out for a while.
So you're saying guiding isn't good for relationships. Should we just spend the rest of the podcast discussing that?
Yeah. One of the lines I told my buddy that he reused on his girlfriend as a cautionary tale was like, I climbed and guided to the detriment of everything else in my life, especially relationships. I stopped trying to have relationships. Yeah, I was just like, this isn't working. And I didn't want to compromise, you know.
Yep.
I wanted to just go climbing all the time, which I still want to go climbing all the time. I just want to compromise more. Like I want to have a life and I
Yeah.
have a kid now and I have a dog and a wife and I'm very happy with that. But also I think I am very happy with that because I didn't have any of that for so long.
Absolutely.
Mike, I'm curious, you referenced climbing, and what style of climbing are you most passionate about? Is it technical rock climbing? Is it big walls? Is it ice climbing? Do you have a kind of like, this is my passion within climbing?
Everything but bouldering is the short answer there. Nothing against it. It's not my thing. I boulder in the gym a lot. It's kind of changed a bit. I've always liked the bigger the better as far as objectives. I haven't big wall climbed really also. But yeah, for a long time I was really into alpine climbing. And then I kind of just lost the thing you need to go alpine climbing, I guess, is the short answer. Unfortunately, it started off because of money. I just didn't have the money to go across the world to go climbing in Nepal or Patagonia or something. And that's a shame because I wish I could give myself like $3,000, not even like 10, right? Just enough to go on like a trip or two. And the danger got to me of alpine climbing. I kind of looked forward. Well, first of all, I mean, we can all name many people, but like it felt like the times I really was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate to this. Very maybe not coincidentally, but like coincidentally, that same season, like three of my heroes would die. And it's like, if I keep going down this path, like, this is a very realistic possibility. And I just never was willing to pay that price. So then I shifted to rock climbing. I was doing a lot of rock climbing, like multi-pitch trad, granite rock climbing is like my favorite probably. A lot of people call it alpine rock climbing, but is Sierra,
Is
the rock's so
Sierra
good,
really
is it always alpine?
alpine? Isn't it
Sometimes it
cool?
is, right? But that's so good. Oh gosh. And same is true in Washington for the record. Like, man, it's the Washington Pass, the enchantment is like it's got amazing rock quality, steep faces, 1,000 foot lines, good quality granite, it's just incredible. So I think that's where my focus really shifted the last like decade. I've done my fair share for the record of steep, fun, drippy, limestoney sport climbing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly,
but
Sam, you talked about how you kind of like met Mike or, saw Mike start guiding. Like that was my first interactions with you, Mike, was you were actually
yeah,
working with us already and we hadn't met yet through the interview process or the guiding process. And then we started running into each other at the climbing gym. And like, so the first thing I knew was like, wow, like Mike really loves rock climbing. A lot of times when people are guiding full time, they're not also training hard. And you were training hard. Obviously, probably the best rock climber on the current Alpenglow staff. And it was like, oh, like this guy's got a passion as well as being, from everything I was hearing, like you were an excellent guide and teacher and these other pieces. Do you think it's like I think it's something Alpenglow really values, but where does that stand for you? How important to you is it that you have a passion for climbing and you continue to chase that passion as well as your passion for guiding?
yeah. I mean, as maybe evidenced by my time recruiting, like the recreational climb was first
Mm.
for that amount of time at least. Yeah, I mean, guiding's a great job. I really love it. And I've become maybe, I don't know if I've become more passionate about it because I've always been really into it. I was always able to split the two, but I always thought myself as like the climber who guides kind of thing, or guiding to enable the climbing habit or support the climbing habit. Another way to look at it is I was just so hungry for the mountains. It was just more of a great thing. But yeah, I've often kind of said like, oh, if I had to choose, like it would be personal climbing for sure. That's changed a little bit now that I think guiding for me has become more professional in that the job's gotten better. And so that helps. and now I'm not climbing as much because I've got less time. So maybe my guide split's a little different there, but for sure. I've often kind of said you get to, if you have a life, you can have a job and you can have your passion. You kind of get to pick two of those, it seems like for me. And so yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it's always a tricky balance, right? And especially as your family grows, and we were talking before the interview about prioritizing the family aspect and how that limits your ability to do some of those other socialization things, and it's always a balance. But it seems like you're navigating that balance pretty well and continuing to climb personally, and your guiding has exploded in different sense, and you're raising a child, so you're doing well on the family front.
Trying to. He had a lot of support from my wife, and so
Yeah.
it's always a constant conversation. I think is like, am I doing such? And then the answer is often yes. Spend do more here. That kind of thing. But I'm trying, man.
And so how did we cover already? How did you come back to guiding from IT? Like, and was that straight to
Yeah,
Alpenglow,
yeah,
or
yeah,
was there another step in between?
yeah. So actually, yeah, to finish that loop. So I think with any job or new pursuit or whatever, but especially a job, like it's exciting at first because it's all new. And then after a couple of years, you kind of hit your stride. You're kind of on cruise control. Like it's not crazy demanding from a learning perspective, and you're kind of like doing. And then it started to decline for me as far as like how much I could talk. I never liked the job, right? I was never like guiding's a great fit, right? But the job was always I was always out of my element or at rest. I wasn't that. And I was like, oh, this enables me to live the lifestyle I want. This is awesome. but that trade-off like seemed like it made less and less sense, I guess, or is it less and less enjoyable? Combined with a similar kind of time range, my dad had a goal to retire by 2020, and it was going to hand off this company to me. And we were like, oh, let's build a company, and I'll have that and run with it. And then kind of realized it was just going to be me, kind of do my own thing. Because I hated being a manager because I couldn't leave. And so I wanted to be able to leave, go on vacations and go climbing. And so it kind of felt like it ran its course. And so I quit, which is hard quitting with a family, right?
Yeah.
And that was 2019. It coincided with my wife getting her PhD. And so she was not able to get a job immediately. So we're like, oh, sweet, let's go on a road trip. And so we went to climb all throughout the US all summer. And then really even cooler, I was really hoping for this. She didn't get a job until the winter semester. And so then we went on a Mediterranean climbing trip. We went to Sardinia and Greece for like 3 months or something. It was stupid long. Like it was way too long of a, but it was great. It was awesome. And then we moved to Reno. And so she got a job here at UNR. My wife, Teresa, is a nursing professor. So that's what brought us here. And at the time I was like, maybe I'll guide a trip a month, a couple days, here or there, just side projects, sanity, keep me kind of in tune and I was going to fix up houses. I was like, I'll do real estate. I'll just be a one-man real estate shop and flip houses or rent them out long-term, but get into like basically mom and pop real estate investment. And then unfortunately for that, guiding became a very good career. Like it was good enough, honestly. Like I was done. Like during that time, I'd laugh at my friends when they were talking about equivocation hitches and all the techie guide stuff. And I was like, man, I'm simul rafting with my bros on steep granite faces. I don't want to go back to 5'2", And then, I started working for Alpenglow, I was like, oh, they do 30 some expeditions a year. Like, that's pretty cool. I've always loved traveling South America and all that. And then I was like, oh, you can combine like local work and international work. And like, oh, the daily rate's actually not bad. And you can work in the winter as a ski guide, which, coming next season for me. And so it was like very gradually over the span, I think 3 years, I was like, oh, this is better than it was for me round one. And I'm sure some of that change was internal as far as what I wanted was good, but like not to like be too much of a shill here, but it was just good. It's good company. It's great company. And I was like, oh, this is just good enough. It drew me in. So it was a pull, I guess, rather than a getting pushed or anything else. Yeah.
Mike, it's interesting. It feels like there was probably changes that happened in your life that made guiding right, or your relationship with guiding, it finally aligned. Alpenglow is a great company. Sure, that's fun to hear. And also, I think the industry changed so much over those 10 or 20 years from when you started to today or to 2020 in terms of professionalization. We're not the only company that professionalized in terms of wages being paid. We're not the only company that's trying to pay, competitive wages or fair wages, in terms of like recognizing that there's got to be life balance in order to make this like a sustainable career. Of course, there's plenty of challenges in the guiding industry, but I do think that's part of this as well, what happened during your hiatus.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember when I left, I was like, this feels like an industry. We feel like you feel adolescent, like looking over to our European older brother, like, oh man, wouldn't that be great if we had what they have over there? It was like a nonstop talking point of like Europe's better, blah blah. But also it's because it was so bad here. And I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think, talking to friends in Colorado and Wyoming, other places, California, Washington, like it got better for sure. The industry progressed. And I was then behind. So I never, to kind of segue into the AMGA stuff, like I never had the financial incentive or justification of getting AMGA training, but also, yeah, just the industry didn't require it really. And now it does. And so that's been a big change I've had to catch up with.
Yeah. And so, Mike, on that
Yeah.
note, you got into guiding, and I know you had some AMGA training, but very limited as compared to your experience, both guiding and climbing. And since joining Alpenglow, you've kind of caught up on that front, and you're now a certified rock and alpine guide and working down the ski track for your full certification. What's kind of your take on that? And like, Certainly, I think the big factor that you just mentioned is like what the industry demanded at the time. But do you like that the industry is kind of moving towards an AMGA training demand, and how do you feel about all that, and what's your take on it all?
How long do you have?
Not long because we got to talk about
Yeah,
Everest.
right. Yeah. We haven't talked about you guys. Um, Overall, I think it's a good thing. Yeah, it's my soundbite there.
That wasn't that
Yeah,
long.
totally. I mean, last year I spent $14,000 on it, so there's that. It's expensive. I think, like most education, so I have a bachelor's and a master's in the outdoor industry in recreation studies and expeditionary studies, and then now working through my professional education and guiding. I love the education part. I love the career progression and all that. The cost is significant and prohibitive for a lot of people. I don't think I would have been able to go through the program with the velocity that I have if I didn't have a little bit of savings from when working ITs, right? So unfortunately, I had to not be a guide for a while to be able to afford being a guide,
Mm,
perhaps.
interesting. Yeah.
But I think in an industry, though, I think it's good. I think it reflects the maturation of our industry. And if that's what it takes, I'm into it.
And I know that you went through and some of the evaluations were just glowing in your later courses and your exams, just like speaking highly of your experience guiding and really pointing to your experience guiding toward, that was the reason that you were so successful in the training and exams through the AMGA. Do you feel like you still learned stuff in those courses and exams with all of the experience you had? Like, was there still value from a learning standpoint later on in the AMGA, or do you feel like you got enough of that during your guiding career early on, and that was really just like the stamp that you needed to travel more and make a higher wage and things like that?
That's the $14,000 question, huh? Uh,
It's probably actually like the
yeah,
$50,000 question once you're done, but
literally,
don't tell Teresa.
literally. Yeah. Well, we have separate. We actually do keep our finances separate, so it's all on me. So which
All
actually
right.
relieves some stress because then I'm not mooching or anything. Anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't learn that much.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a fair, honest
Yeah.
question. I think there's a ton of value to the experience and there's a ton of value to the training. And in a perfect world, you're getting a little bit out of both sides, but there's guides that go through with so much experience guiding that they don't learn as much through the AMGA training. And there's guides that go through and they get everything they know through the training and they're still lacking on the experience side. And I think there's multiple ways to skin a cat.
Yeah. I definitely believe in the education. I still learn things, of course, but I do think with maybe a couple days of tune-up training, I could have probably taken the exam, the Alpine exam, without going through the training or go through like maybe like a custom 5 day quick refresh. Here's what's going on lately. But in the rock, I learned a lot, but I was a younger guy when I took the rock. So I took the first two rock courses a long time ago, and I took the exam recently. Yeah, I just did the whole Alpine track, and I felt like I was in my zone the whole time. But then I've recently was talking to somebody. I was like, wait a second, I've probably done 90% of my guiding in the Alpine, and so of course I'm going to be comfortable there, right? You also have not seen the eval for my ski course. But I haven't worked as a ski guide yet. So right, so I'm opposite, right? So like in the Alpine, I'm
Yeah.
super experienced, less credentialed, and to be at least as of a couple of years ago, and then very much the inexperienced and uncredentialed in skiing, I guess. So I've been recreationally skiing for a handful of years, but we all know guiding and recreational climbing or skiing is different. So it's actually kind of cool starting off a new path. This is very so that's something that I very much have to learn. We're kind of opposite, Sam, huh? In that way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we can support
Yeah,
each other.
totally.
Yeah. And I think just for our listeners, we should kind of point you maybe in the show notes to some episodes where we've talked a little bit about the American Mountain Guides Association and what AMGA or IFMGA certification is. For listeners who don't have that background, we might not be explaining enough, but we don't want to explain too much here since that's not what this episode is about. But I think we're also planning an episode upcoming to discuss kind of certification training and that technical side more with another guest. I think it's interesting because Mike, you and I, we had a bit of a similar experience. I guided for over a decade before I started my training, my AMGA training, but I did it back in the very early 2000s. And so I had the opportunity still to challenge and skip steps. So similar to you, I was really strong in alpine and rock, skipped a bunch of steps in those, and I was weaker in skiing because I hadn't done a lot of ski guiding because I hadn't moved out west for most of my decade of guiding. And so like started that process in a more traditional way. But I think you are you're old is essentially what I'm trying to say here, but not quite old enough. Like you're in this interesting middle ground that I think we've talked about in the podcast before. Like you were no longer allowed to challenge steps and skip steps, but you had probably too much experience for some of the early steps, and came up in the sport before, or the industry before it was kind of expected. I think the good thing now, I hope, like when I think, or at least the message I want to get out on the podcast is like, no guide in their 20s should not be going through AMGA certification. And it should be two tracks right alongside. Like you save $2,000 to go rock climb for 6 weeks in your van, you save $2,000 to take a course. Like it has to start from the very beginning now. And any guide coming into the industry would be crazy to skip the step of certification, in my opinion. But because you're not going to have a job in a decade's time, you were in this really frustrating middle ground where you got to gain loads of experience without it. And now you're having to almost go backwards in some ways.
Yeah, I fully agree with basically everything you just said. I've sometimes said, am I like the last of the old school ones or the first of the
Yeah.
new school ones?
First,
you know,
right.
but either way, I felt kind of out of place. You know,
You're like
the
I
Gen
don't
X or
know,
something other.
yeah, the Gen X generation was the lost generation, right? You're like the Gen X generation of guys. And there's a lot of
Which
you out there. Like we've had this same conversation with like Melissa or not. I used to think about Dave Hahn on Everest, and it was like he's obviously quite a bit older than the two of you, but there was this generation that didn't find their place in the AMGA, and I think it's challenging.
Yeah, and then you have people like Nettle that were offered the pin just to get buy-in to the AMGA in general. And he's like, "No, I don't want it." We're like, "Oh, ma, what?" But that was, I mean, how many decades ago, right? Jeez.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. The grandfathering was one generation before me where we could still challenge, but there was not more
uh,
grandfathering coming in.
right. Yeah.
All right. Should we move on from the AMGA?
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference.
And so, your path with Alpenglow was pretty quick. You started out on the Via Ferrata, and like less than a year later, you were off to South America guiding expeditions. And pretty quickly after that, you weren't an assistant guide. You were leading your own private trips down in South America for Alpenglow. And then you did a little 2-trip stint on Aconcagua and off to Mount Everest. Tell us a little bit about like how that came about. Obviously, I'm sure that was an exciting little period with Alpenglow where you were like just ripping on expeditions and having a great old time and progressing through the company ranks pretty quickly. And that filled a lot of what you were looking for from a financial standpoint and also from a work enthusiasm standpoint. Is expeditions like that's your bread and butter? That's what you like to do?
The cool thing is I like to do it all. And I love being able to change it up. Like right now I'm working via Ferratas 4 days a week and some rock climbing in there. And I'm a happy clam right now, 'cause I'm coming home every night, helping my daughter get up and go to bed, And so that's amazing. But if I was only doing that, it wouldn't be enough, right? And so I love being able to leave, go to a different country, speak a new language, all that kind of stuff for, you know, 2 to 5 weeks, I guess, in case of Everest. And then be able to come home and have work, and it's the same company, which is nice too. Just like pragmatically, there's no tension really between the international and the local programs. Whereas if it was different companies, there would probably be that, especially when I leave in the middle of summer to go to Bolivia for 6 weeks, like I did 2 years ago. Yeah, so I guess the progression there. So I had done, I think, like 10 or something Alaska expeditions, way back, and then I'd done a couple Bolivia and then Ecuador, and so I was kind of coming in with that experience. And so I think I'd done first was I think I did an Ecuador trip with us, if I remember right, or maybe I can't remember. Anyway, there's enough of them. Unfortunately, it's hard to keep track. But yeah, I did a Denali. So we all needed a Denali lead guide, and I was kind of feeling over Denali at that point after doing it 6 times. But I was like, all right, I'll give you a Denali if I could take something else. Just give me something else. And so a month later, they're like, hey, we got 2 Bolivia trips a week after Denali. I was like, yeah, screw it, sign me up. And so, yeah, it's been rad. I've done like 2 to 3 expeditions a year, which to me is like a good amount. I'm not full time expedition guiding. I think I don't want that. First of all, you get too weak, you can't climb hard. But which well, now I'm so skinny fat from Everest. But anyway, the yeah, it's been really nice. It's been a good blend for sure. Yeah, and then it's felt like a progression, like a logical progression. An altitude complexity, like you said, lead guide rolls in there. And so yeah, I felt like Everest was a logical next step. Maybe something in the middle, like a Cho Oyu or something like that, would be the perfect progression. But it sounds like we run more Everest trips, so there's more Everest guide spots, and so that's where a lot of new, that's where my aim was. But yeah, that was the progression, I guess.
And before we dive into your experience on Everest this year, was Everest something on your radar? Like, did you ever, growing up as a kid or in your early years of guiding, like have aspirations of going to Mount Everest? Or was that like a little bit of a curveball that came more recently?
See, probably the latter. It was very much a personal opportunity that came up relatively recently, right? It was like January or something. Where they were like, "Hey, you want to go to Everest?" And I was like, "Yeah." It didn't take me too long to decide. It was a little hard.
You did ask your wife, I'm sure, though.
I did. We talked about it for a couple, like 2 weeks. But sorry, what was the question?
Well, just about your curiosity around Everest and, where that kind of came from.
So my intro to climbing as a concept was reading Into Thin Air in high school. So this was 2002, maybe. And then I read Seven Summits, and then I read some other really boring book and stopped reading climbing books. Expedition books are so damn boring. But anyway, how do we milk a 30-day trip into a 200-page book? Yeah, so but then going to college, I got way into technical climbing, and then our climbing professor, Casey Henley, shout out to Casey, was a longtime Mountain Madness guide. And so he had done all the trips, longtime Everest guide and stuff. And so he had done Everest like we were in college. This is like late 2000s. And he was going to the south side, and he was basically like, yeah, it's good money. You tolerate it. But like so many of us go to the mountains for the mountain experience. And he was like, that's just devoid of that experience. And his recent trips there to Everest. So it very much like the popular concepts, right, is I got turned off to the whole idea, but it's also easy to get turned off to it when it's not an option. So I was jaded from afar, I guess. And especially in the Northwest, everybody trash talks slogging, right? Because we do maybe a little too much up there of that. And so I wasn't repulsed by it, but it was not on the radar. Yeah. And so the cool thing is like being on the north side was a mountain experience, which was rad. But yeah, it was never an option, so I never even thought hard about it. And I remember telling somebody like a year or two ago, I was like, I'm working for an expedition company. We go to Everest. Eventually, I'm going to have to decide if I want to go there or not. And so this trip was like, why not? Like, why not check it out? And then, yeah, overwhelmingly positive for sure. So I'd like to go back.
It's a really interesting thing in that I think Mount Everest is one of the more polarizing peaks
Yeah.
out there, and people are pretty much either interested and keen or repulsed. And I think, like you said, they're repulsed from afar, right? They're repulsed. Not no person that's been to Everest has ever really shown that repulsive expression towards it. It's mostly the people that hear stories or read the media that are repulsed by it. And I think you're right that typically most of them don't have the option anyway. And so that's maybe where some of that reaction comes from. But it's an interesting kind of polarizing peak in that, people are generally one side or the other.
Yeah. And we just have a funny tendency as people and climbers in particular to love judging other people's actions in a sense and stuff. And it's like, first of all, nobody cares, or who cares? That's been a guiding philosophy in my life. Nobody cares about what I do. I don't have to tell anybody what I do I go climb because I love it, And I think that's unfortunately not a part of that conversation a lot of times. But maybe it's been overshadowed by all the negative stuff, right? So it's usually not about the challenge itself. It's about everything involved with going. Maybe that causes that division there.
So for the both of you, I know many listeners are kind of curious about the Alpenglow season and how things progressed on the mountain. Can you guys kind of work together and give us a bit of a play-by-play in terms of you left Reno on which date and then you came back to Reno on which date and what the heck happened in between?
April 23rd to June 2nd.
That's amazing. Mike even knows the dates. That I had no idea when we left. But yeah, it was, one of my favorite things about Everest is actually we get to have a big guide team working together. So much of mountain guiding is individual. It's one guide with a group. And this was an opportunity. I think we had 6 mountain guides working together, along with photographer Griffin and base camp manager Emily Turner. So I think 4 of us left from Tahoe, Reno area, drove down to SF, flew over, and that right away for me, like that's one of the things I love about this trip is we're working together, we're traveling together. We had a big group of members meeting us. I think in the end, so we were 6 mountain guides, 11 members, 12 Nepali Sherpa, 6 cooks and cooks assistants, and then yak drivers and Chinese government liaison officers. And so like we're a little city on the mountain, and that's kind of where it all started, was getting all 40 plus people to base camp established on the Chinese or Tibetan side of the mountain at 17,000 feet, and then beginning to make acclimatization rotations. And I think big picture, just thinking about the season, this was the season of smooth, like is the way for me to think about it. And I'm interested to hear Mike's perspective, obviously from not being there so much or as many times. Like last season, we were kind of hair on fire the whole season. We had this phenomenal season for the clients, every single client, 100% success rate last year. But the guiding team and the logistics team were basically barely holding on by our fingernails the whole time after 4 years not being in China. And this year, it was just from start to finish. Everyone was on the same page. The Chinese were in full support of Alpenglow's methodology and safety systems and guiding team. And just from my perspective, like essentially nothing went wrong for, the first 32 days of the trip. And so it was a lot of fun. We were firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I totally felt like that. Like a lot of people have been like, "How was it? Was it like the hardest thing you've ever done?" I was like, "No," because usually the logistics are a challenge, right? You're picking up slack, right? As the fires happen, you're putting them out and all that. And you and Topo, man, you just did too good of a job for to give it probably an accurate representation of what these trips are usually like. Because man, it was just so smooth. It was like boring, right? We're like, oh, we went there, we waited for a while, we got our window, we climbed, and it was amazing weather, and we went home, which is great, right? It's great news. It means that you have so much extra energy. Really, and this is where the logistics come in, right? Then all your energy is put towards climbing. You're not dealing with all the other stuff.
Yep. I mean, the funniest representation I have of that is like we had multiple media outlets tell us that they didn't feature us this season because it was so boring. Everything went
Yeah.
perfectly from start to finish. And like it's kind of a compliment. And at the same time, it totally like, we're like, no, that's the story people need to hear. Like Everest can be done safely and cleanly and well.
We had multiple media outlets tell us that they would not be based on the north side because it's too boring. because there's not enough people dying and getting frost. Yeah, there's not enough trauma, right? Like, yeah, there was some frostbite that definitely went unreported on our side, but it was not debilitating. There was no, you know,
And to be clear, not on
zero.
Alpenglow's team, but on the north side of
Yes,
the
yes.
mountain.
Other teams,
Yeah.
yeah, not to throw too much shade, but it happened. So there.
So little play by play. You guys fly from SFO to
Mm.
Chengdu, China. In Chengdu, you meet some liaison officers. You get your access to the Tibetan Autonomous Region, which allows you to fly from Chengdu to Lhasa. How many days drive from Lhasa to Northside Everest Base Camp does it take on the way in?
Oh, okay. I think it's 3. It feels like a lot, but it's and then there's 1 day in Lhasa. So I think it's roughly a week from like when you leave home to when you get to base camp. Yeah. And that whole
Yep.
time
And
it's kind of planes, trains, and automobiles with lots and lots of restaurant food, which was kind of sweet. But yeah, you're just trying to put on the calories before you lose your appetite,
yeah, and I mean, I think the interesting part is you're trying to, you know, almost gain weight, put on the calories, as you're saying, before, you head into the mountains and head up to high altitudes. You're trying to move quick enough to maintain your pre-acclimatization that you earned in that hypoxic tent for 2 months leading up to the trip. But you're also trying to not go so fast that you still feel crappy. So the drive from Lhasa to base camp, I believe, is fewer than the amount of days that we take on the way in, because there's a little bit of like a let's go slow and do some day hikes, move around, let our bodies kind of adapt. And there's also jet lag and travel, swelling and all those things that are trying to be managed on the way in. And then you arrive in base camp. And what was that experience like, arriving in Everest Base Camp for your first time?
First of all, driving to base camp is kind of mind blowing and just as a concept, right? Like it's just bonkers. Like, yeah, like we had a washing machine. I mean, it didn't work, but still, like we had a washing machine and just brought it on a truck and like threw off the truck and it worked. More than that, though, was the Chinese they built the welcome center in like the perfect spot because you pull up and like there's the mountain. You probably get one of the best views of the mountain like from this little vista point, which is like coincidentally the barrier where tourists are not allowed past, and you can only go there if you have a climbing permit. And there's also a monastery behind that we didn't go to that particular one, but my gosh, what a place! So anyway, I was just like everybody's seeing it at the same time. Everybody's got different reactions, right? Some people are like, "Oh my gosh," like crazy elated, and other people, I get a little more like, okay, here we go. Here's a little bit more of a not quite intimidated, but that sort of attitude, right? Then yeah, you show up to base camp and you hop off the bus and you're done with the bus and there's this big old dome tent filled with snacks and espresso and awesome food and everything, and it's warm, it's out of the wind. You have your little wall tent, like your own personal tent you can stand up in, and it's like you've got electrical in it. And then you meet the Sherpa team. So that's a really cool moment of like, okay, here's the people. We're not going to be next to them. We're not going to see them face to face all that much on a day to day basis, but they are literally going to be carrying this expedition. So
Yeah, they're behind the scenes. They're
yeah,
what make the wheels move.
yeah, totally. And it's easy to forget that, right? We're like, oh, we put X many people on the summit. It's like, well, we also had X many Sherpa as well, but also that's who enabled us to go. That's who sets up the tent for you to
Yeah.
crash into. You hit camp 3 and you're at 100 meters or whatever it is. But yeah, and then yeah, as far as the play by play, we're just chilling in base camp. It sounds funny to say we like hang out, and we go for walks, and then we go for a hike. But like you said, even at 17,000 at base camp, like we pre-hike climatized in the hypoxico tents to 17,000 or 18 or something. But you feel it. It feels like you're out, your body's working, and so it doesn't feel great. Like so it begins, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to note like the rapid ascent program that Alpenglow's developed over years, and that we have proven that it works many, many times, allows you to arrive straight to base camp without having to slowly acclimatize your way in on a trek, without like feeling severe repercussions or having dramatic health, problems as a result. But it's not like you're going to show up and feel like you do when you're home at sea level or at 6,000 feet where we live in Tahoe. You're still going to feel the fact that you're at 17,500 feet. the pre-acclimatization makes that possible, but it doesn't make it feel good necessarily.
Yeah, 100%. Nor does the hypoxico experience feel good. You're basically taking the crappy part of acclimatizing and you bring it home so you can be around your job and your family and everything else. And you shave a month off your trip, which is amazing. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it is bonkers to within a few days because like most of the Tibetan plateau is not that high. Like even the last town is 14,000. Not that high, but you get very quickly to base camp, and then you're like, for where we are, we feel amazing. You're just obviously not at sea level anymore, and that's true for the rest of the trip.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then yeah, we do we call it the frozen river. We do some fixed line training on one of the cliffs. It's all acclimatizing, right? You're doing motion at these altitudes, and then yeah, we do a hike up to well, you could go up to very high, but we go up to like 20,000, 21,000 feet, so 3,000, 4,000 foot gain at the most, just for a day hike. Take like another rest day, and then and then we start making our way up, acclimatizing up the mountain. So we stay one at an interim camp, and up to advanced base camp.
And so, up to this point, you've had your first experience in the Himalaya, and you've been in a lot of the big mountain ranges around the world, in South America, the Alaska range. You've spent a lot of time there. Did this feel different to you? Was this just like, was the scale and the scope of this expedition different, or did it feel kind of comfortable at this point?
Mm, interesting question. Well, you're camping on dirt and you have vehicles around you, so that part felt far easier than landing at Denali base camp, right? And so in that way, it's weird. It's like it's weird dissonance between the size of the mountains you're around, yet the environment you're in is quite nice. We're in sunshirts during the day. It's cool at night, but it's not cold. And you're wearing light gloves. It's like very comfortable. And then I say that's true for also for advanced base camp, for how high you are. You're at 21,000, so you're higher than anything in North America. It's kind of the same. You're on a moraine. You're kind of warm during the day. It's cold at night. It's fine. And then it like drastically changes when you get to the upper mountain as far as like the feel of it. But overall, like I mean, we had a really warm trip also, so it's a little hard for me to like generalize from just this one experience of very good weather decision making and good fortune. But the stuff you're looking at is it's almost hard to comprehend the scale of it all, right? You're looking at things that are 10,000 feet higher than you are and stuff. So it always looks a little smaller than it is too, you know?
Yeah, it looks like it's just right there, yet it's
Totally.
many, many days climbing away.
Yeah, you go to the rocks over there and it's a half day trip, you know?
So your play-by-play was up to advanced base camp, and from there you guys continue up the mountain?
Yeah, and actually just to zoom back a half a step, you know, people talk about the Everest Base Camp trek on the Nepal side through the Khumbu, which I've not done, but I've heard is amazing. Gosh, the trip to ABC is incredible. You're at a medial moraine, so there's two enormous glaciers to the side of you. You're hiking on a trail, so it's like a non-technical thing. But the glaciers are kind of old in their life cycle. They're pretty low, and so they're like not a flat glacier. They're like these 100-foot penitente ice teeth, and it's like you're hiking in between the jawline of like the biggest shark ever or something. It's like this is just incredible. So that was cool. And then yeah, and then advanced base camp. So it's 21,000. You really feel it. Like you get there and you're like, oh, this feels challenging to be here. And you sit like we were ordered. You know, Emily is amazing, our base camp manager. You get there and she's like, "Hi, welcome to advanced base camp. Sit down in that chair. Like, do not move. Drink some water. Like, hang out because like altitude catches up with you, right? Over a few hours or days, even. But yeah. So then I felt like that was the beginning of the stress on the body from real altitude for sure. I don't know. What do you think, Adrian?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have had occasionally challenges with altitude with members at base camp, and usually that's because something's kind of gone wrong in the process. Whereas ABC 21,000 feet, it's like no matter how right you do everything, life is just hard up there, and it's strange because you can walk in sneakers and have yak supporting you, so we have a pretty comfortable spot. But it's like it's equivalent to Camp 2 on the south side. Like it's really high on the mountain, and there is a significant amount of suffering that goes on there, regardless of kind of like acclimatization and creature comforts. So I think we saw some of that, and And yet also, like, you're so high on the mountain, the job is to like not spend too many days up there, so you need to keep working. And so that's kind of what I always think about in that space. It's an interesting testing time for people, because we need to not only survive there, like Emily told us to do, we also need to pretty quickly start organizing gear and going higher on the mountain. Alpenglow kind of has this, standard that we expect you to at least tag 7,000 meters or 23,000 feet without supplemental oxygen. In a perfect situation, I think I'm still a believer in actually sleeping at that camp without supplemental oxygen. And so, yeah, that's kind of the hard work of the whole thing. And interestingly, I think we saw some of this. You probably saw some of this, Mike, being your first time there. There's a trend in the industry to do
Yep.
less of that. And I and our expedition doctor, Monica Pires, and Topo really feel strongly that like testing people without supplemental oxygen to essentially the summit of Aconcagua is a much safer way to test people's health, fitness, and climbing ability than to give people a crutch of oxygen lower on the mountain. And then that test doesn't happen on oxygen until higher, let's say around 8,000 meters. And all of a sudden, if there is a health problem or acclimatization problem or a technical problem, it can be near impossible to rescue that person from 8,000 meters or above, when that same test could have been done at 7,000 meters, where it's quite easy, quote unquote, for a team like Alpenglows to do a rescue from there. But were you experiencing kind of those conversations with clients and with other teams and things like that about this kind of like Alpenglow expectation?
I think they were all on board, so there wasn't any like pushback or anything. Fortunately, it's easy to trust, people that have been there so many times. So it's like we just defer to that judgment. And I think, I mean, the proof's in the pudding, right? Like, man, I can speak personally. Like, I felt good on the summit rotation. Like summit day, I
Mm.
felt good. But I think it's because we spent a lot of time acclimatizing. We spent the night at Camp One at 7,000 meters, and that was like wasn't a terrible night, but it wasn't a good night. I feel good. It feels pretty awful. Uh, and you're really looking to get down. But then we go to the summer rotation. You're like, oh, it felt good. So I don't have another example of what it would feel like if we didn't have that schedule. But man, it worked. I'll say that much.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of Sam for the blow by blow. So we did that rotation. Not everyone on our team succeeded at that rotation. And I think that's, I've beaten the drum enough about 100% success is bullshit. And we talked a lot about that on the last episode. So we don't have to go into loads of details there, but I think it's important. Like Alpenglow didn't have 100% success this year. And of course, I wish we did. Everyone worked hard to be there, but I think that's actually the reality of the mountain. And that kind of like testing point, the people who didn't succeed had to like have a plan to try again. And it's hard, it's painful, it's brutal, but that's the expectation. So, but more or less, people successfully did that rotation. We came back down to advanced base camp, and we were in this. You might have spoken a little bit about this while I was lost in my broken Wi-Fi, but this was an interesting season where the jet stream really didn't leave the mountain for most of the season. And so there wasn't an early summit push window that we felt matched Alpenglow's requirements to give everyone the best shot at a safe and successful season. So we actually dropped all the way back down to base camp. And interestingly, because of the development that's happening to support tourism on the Chinese side of the mountain, we got to base camp, and our base camp's incredible. Fresh food, great cook, beautiful heated tents, wearing a t-shirt inside, espressos, cappuccinos, like great 5G Wi-Fi, streaming movies, all that fun stuff that people hear about on Everest. And it's actually quite easy to provide. Like we had all those things, but also now an hour and a half below Everest Base Camp on the north side is like a 4-star hotel with heated floors and massive rain showers and deep tubs and like fantastic spicy Chinese food. So we actually made the decision to not stay in our base camp, but to drop even below that for a night. And we spent a night in a hotel before Summit Push. And it is, for me, like, it is weird to leave the mountains in that way, and to have like a traffic jam and like stoplights and like it. I think it was an unparalleled good in terms of people's recovery and like ability to reset the brain and completely turn off for 24 hours. But it is a different thing in mountaineering to do that, and I'm still personally kind of like wrapping my brain around it.
Yeah, Mike, I'm curious on your perspective. You come from this like Denali, Alaska Range background where the thought of what you guys did on Everest, dropping down to a town to recover before going for your summit attempt, is probably like so foreign for you. Except for it's like when you finish one expedition before your personal trip in the Alaska Range, you might go to Talkeetna for a night or two. But also, you have a wife and a young daughter at home. Did dropping down, like, was that difficult mentally for you? Like, it almost pulls you out of that expedition mindset and allows you to kind of like touch base with home and think about the potential that you could be like continuing on your way home. Was there any difficulty there?
Not in that way. The trip's starting to feel long by that point, though. So you are starting to think of home. One of our guys, unfortunately, had to go home, just a personal reason. He was physically great. And so I think everybody starts thinking like, oh man, he gets to see his kids tomorrow. Like, man, here we are. We got weeks left. We're not even close to being done, right? Yeah, it's funny because I one of the things I hate is talking about the bar and the burgers and the beer and the showers when you're on the mountain because it takes you out of there, right? Like, and I think in addition to just being a disease that doesn't help, I think you tend to lose the focus, right? But this was a long enough trip. Actually, coming out of the mountains for me, I dug it. I thought it was great. I thought it was like it was like a weekend off. It was like oh, cool. We get to like refresh. We get to lick our wounds. We're at 14,000 feet. We're playing dice, drinking whiskey till midnight because we were finally allowed to because we're like at low altitude. You get a night off. Yeah, totally at
Low
14, yeah,
altitude.
Mount Whitney.
Right.
Yeah.
Summit of Mount Whitney.
So in that way, it was I loved it. I thought it was great. But there is that thing, right? Now you're out of the mountain mode. Now you get back into mountain mode. Okay, let's go climbing. But I guess to segue to the next phase, like after that, I think we had a day's camp and it was off to the races. That's about right? Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. We ended up having a couple extra days at advanced
that's
base
right.
camp. We were hoping the summer window. It was a funny season because it actually, I guess there was a lot of gray and uncertainty around weather, but in another way, like I've never seen forecasters be as clear cut. Like this is not a good window. There is a great window coming, and so we just knew we were going to go for the great window. But then even we kind of like dreamt of the great window maybe moving forward by a couple of days because waiting's hard. And just like Mike said, like I also, have a young kid at home and my wife Emily was obviously working pretty hard doing the juggle for 5+ weeks. And business has been really busy. And I think Alpenglow could have used me in the office. So like there is that little bit. So we moved up to advanced base camp hoping like, even though everyone said the window was going to start on the 27th, maybe it'll come on the 24th. And we ended up just having to wait at advanced base camp instead of base camp. So that's what we did. We moved the whole team up to advanced base camp. We spent a couple more days there staying sane and like having the time to like dial in our logistics and what food we were going to bring on the mountain to like a level we've never dialed it in before to kind of fill that time. And then finally getting to head off on our 4-day summit push, which really was, pretty magical. We did still have wind between Camp 1 and Camp 2 and Camp 2 and Camp 3 in order to be in position for the very first day of the Great Window. We could have waited another day or two and actually had no wind on the entire climb. But again, even our sanity, there's still a balancing act going on of like catching a perfect window and not wasting too many extra days. Alpenglow runs a 35-day USA to USA trip and or Europe to Europe or wherever everyone's coming from. And like we wanted to, in the end, we didn't go over that. We stayed within that 35-day window. And I think that is important when possible. Like while everyone is prepared to add days, that's what we require on rapid ascent trips. We didn't want to add days. And this window came in such a way that by climbing through some wind in those lower mountain camps, we were able to catch a perfectly stellar, warm summit day and get everyone down and home actually one day early. We were 34 days instead of 35 days. So I loved that. And also just like, the windy days, I think like they pushed people. They certainly pushed me as a mountain guide. And that also is like, it's part of this mountain. It was well within our safety, like parameters. And at the same time, like you couldn't really make mistakes, or at least from what I saw moving between those camps, mistakes would have had like real consequences.
So you guys move up through Camp 1, Camp 2, and Camp 3. And Mike, talk us through your first push to the top of the
Yeah, I
world.
mean, I think we did, yeah. I mean, for as nice of a summit day as we had some burly days getting up to Camp 3. So we just got a taste of what it might be like on a brutal summit day. And it was nonstop heavy winds, like high winds. Like you could not really communicate very well to the person next to you. Lots of sign language, lots of stuff like that. We had an oxygen bottle problem. Like one of the guys thought he was like, I don't know what the hell's happening. I'm like having a panic attack. His oxygen came unscrewed a little bit. Stuff like that, right? It's like it comes up and you gotta deal with it. But it's that much harder. And when it's that windy, it's so hard to communicate. But my gosh, going to sleep after 2 days of nonstop, like, high winds around your tent and everything, waking up at like 11 p.m. and it's dead quiet. And it's just that feeling of like, oh, fuck yeah, this is happening. It was a good feeling, man. Like any other summit day, you wake up way too early, take way too long to get ready, over hours. And yeah, you start climbing in the dark. It's all fixed lines, by the way, from basically just above advanced base camps. You're attached with a Jumar and a carabiner the whole way. And so in camp, you're clipping into the line, you start hooking it up. Naturally the groups kind of separate and you start. So that was for me a challenge. All the guiding I've done to this point has involved a rope. And like on fixed lines, you have the rope on the mountain. We carry a rescue rope on our pack, but like people are kind of free to do their own thing theoretically. And so,
well, that's why at Alpenglow we start you off on the Via Ferrata, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's why I started there. It's actually had a lot in common with the Via Ferrata.
It's the world's
I know
highest
it was.
Via Ferrata.
I had like so many flashbacks in the last 2 weeks of like, oh, this is like just like Everest, except here. But yes, but you're managing. It's not like ski guiding where you're managing people without the rope, and so you just constantly checking in with people. As guides, you're kind of floating. Each climber for summit day has a Sherpa next to them, so it's their Sherpa for the day to help them. And so, because we had somebody drop out, and because we had Griffin as well, we had a very favorable ratio. It was almost 1-to-1 for summit day for the climbers up there. And so, it's just like, any climbing day, you're just kind of working your way up, except you got that magic oxygen attached to you. So that was, certainly takes the edge off, But my gosh, the climb is actually really good. I was amazed. I was like, if you took this mountain and put it down in the Cascades, this would be a 5-star moderate guiding objective, climbing objective, whatever you want to call it. Like, it was never easy, but it was never hard. It's almost like the moderately technical with consequences because you're on a ridge the whole way. It was incredible. I was like, this is engaging climbing. This is really, and then of course the sun rises, as you're like on the ridge, you start seeing the whole Himalaya range and there's no wind. You're almost too hot. It's like, oh my gosh, it was just, you couldn't dream of that quality of a day, So that was a treat.
And AB, you've had 10 summits now of Mount Everest. Where does this one rank for you? Obviously, you've done all sorts of different things, from having your own first summit to summiting without oxygen to summiting last year on a private mountain, essentially. Where does this one rank?
I mean, it ranks as a super special one. I think for a couple of reasons. One is the weather that Mike just mentioned. Like, having that good weather up there, most of the time when I'm on my summit day with a group or without oxygen, this was true too. Like, I'm scared most of the time. And I say scared not in like a panic way, but as scared as it in a really positive way of like, this is very real. And what we know we're going to have challenges of like keeping everyone alive, getting everyone down safe without frostbite, whether it whatever the different challenges might be. And this year's summit day really didn't do that. I got to the summit. It was so still, so calm, and our team was so strong and together, and communications were so easy that I didn't have that same feeling of fear that I normally have. And so in some ways I got to be a little more, I guess, like retrospective, like and take it all in. And I think there's a little piece, the other thing that made it special, like I didn't think like 10 summits was important, or like that was never a number I shot for, but it encourages a moment of introspection and like thought of like, how did this end up happening? And so I had some of those feelings, and the day allowed for those feelings, and the way the guiding team worked out, that my private teammate member ended up going home right before the summit push. And so I was left still kind of like working with Topo, overseeing this team, ready to jump in wherever I needed to jump in, but also with a little extra bandwidth than I normally have. It was a magical day. And the best way that I think it's kind of represented is something happened, which to my memory has never happened before, which is every single member of the team, every Sherpa, every guide, every member made it all the way back to Advanced Base Camp on the same day as the summit day. Every other season I've ever had, some portion of the team has needed to stop at Camp 1, whether it's Sherpa team members who had more work to do on the mountain that wind or tiredness or whatever didn't allow, or a few members, a portion of the team were just wrecked and didn't want to do the final really technical climbing from Camp 1, North Col Camp, down to ABC. The day was so magical that, 8 p.m. rolled around and every single one of us was back at ABC, like, cranking tunes and drinking our first beer kind of thing. It was spectacular.
Right on. And Mike, you've had a lot of summits, personal climbs, guiding work. How does this one rank for you in terms of memorable summits?
Oof, I definitely won't forget it for sure. Uh, that's a special thing, right? But yeah, to Adrian's point, it was so easy. We can enjoy it, So I certainly, have had way more harrowing experiences, especially getting off of summits, like the time the storm hits you on the way down kind of thing, that were harder from that level, right? Because it was such good weather. It's like it's like the weather and the altitude are the two things you worry about, right? You took one of those away, and it's like that's insane. I was too hot. Like I didn't wear gloves and a hat. Like I had my bare helmet and my ears showing for the whole summit day. I was like, am I getting a sunburn on this? Like this is insane. So that's like a little hard to. I did not get a good representation of what it's typically like up there.
Yeah, like my biggest challenge as an expedition leader was like for the new guys, Mike was new, Tico was new, another guide. And then, probably 4 of our Sherpa were new because we try to bring in young Sherpa every year. And like, I felt like I was a broken record, like, don't think it's always like this, right? Like, don't not bring your down suit next year. Don't think you're going to just like rock and roll. Yeah, it was wild.
Sounds like a pretty special one, pretty memorable for both of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good team, like solid team, like fun to be around. Like Adrian mentioned it in the beginning, but like from in the Mexican shop at Chico on the way to the airport, all the way back is like you're around just wonderful people, and that's the guide staff, the Sherpa, the team members. It's just great. It's great hanging out too, because a lot of hanging out, a lot of strategic waiting time you got to do.
Yeah, I think like one representation. I mean, you mentioned the members. Like this team, obviously, this has just been a wild time in our world and in the U.S. and there's like a lot of news. Like this team was able to talk about like news and politics, not because we all agreed. Certainly, that was not the case, but like there was a great vibe from beginning to end of like people being respectful, wanting to help each other, wanting to work hard. And we really did like, I guess that was the other like memorable thing. Like, what a great team across the board. And that's what Alpenglow always endeavors to create. And this season, like it really all came together.
Well, congratulations to you both, from the first for Mike and the 10th for AB. That's a big one for both of you. So, Mike, before we wrap things up, every guest, we have 2 special questions. I don't know if you got to prep these or not, but we want to hear your best Duffel Shuffle story.
Oh boy, I was thinking about this. Is like I mean, going on so many trips. There's always just dragging the bags and all that, right? Like it's just a part of it. But man, I think when I was younger, it was more because now I'll just pay the extra bag fee, you know. But man, back then I would strategically only take the 2 check bags plus these all get this climbing gear and ski gear, right? Uh, Max out the carry-on, put all the metal in my carry-on, like all the carabiners and pitons and like every dense thing. And I remember walking through actually that semester course I did in college in the Calgary to Joshua Tree flight after this whole thing. So I had 3 months worth of gear, and I was in my double boots, my Colflac mountain boots on the flight with a big puffy
Amazing.
jacket.
We still see that every now and then of like an Everest member. It's like, no one's going to Everest spending
Totally.
less than $40,000, and you're wearing your boots, so like you save
I
80.
know. Right now, I'd be
It's
like
bad.
gladly pay the $100 for the third bag, you know. Yeah, and like my carry-on, because your
That just
carry-ons
have a
aren't
pair of boots
supposed to
in
be
them.
that heavy because there's, I'm sure there's weight limits. And one of the flight attendants, oh, I'll help you with that. No, 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 I'll put it up there, you know. And you get in there, and the guy next to you is like this fucking guy, you know, because you're like the guy who's like taking off 4 puffy jackets and shoving them under your seat in front of you, and and then I remember, and of course I didn't want to pay the $5 for the little cart, you know, so you can actually push. So I remember
Right.
tying my 2 duffels together on one side and then having the ski duffel on the other side with a 50-liter, 60-pound bag of metal in my backpack, like dragging it all through. Yeah, so there's that. Uh, it contrasted with,
That brings up
oh,
so
yeah,
many great memories. I love that you told that story.
yeah, and then contrasted with like coming back from Bolivia last year, I was connecting through Lima, and I was like, oh, let me just like look at the flights, and my Lima flight, I came in at like 7 or something in the morning and left at 9 at night. And I was like, sweet, I got to take a surfing lesson. I ate a bunch of ceviche, like, and I just had a carry on, of course, you know, because I planned ahead. And I was like, oh, that was, it's a different era, man.
Getting
Totally.
getting soft bond. So a second question we ask everyone, you're going back to Everest next spring and you're packing those duffel bags. What is the very first thing you're going to put in? Or what is that most important thing you would never do an expedition without bringing?
Oh boy. Oh man. Pragmatically, it's like the Showa gloves. Oh, the face thing, the outer U. Shout out to the guy from New Hampshire making the outer U. It's like a guy too. I love it when the company's like, dude, Kevin. Is that it was Kevin? Oh, sweet.
Kevin. It's
He sends you
Kevin.
like a thank you note when you buy it too. But yeah, it's a I don't even know. It's really thin neoprene kind of fabric, and it just blocks your nose from getting roasted. And it has these little ear loops, and it fits underneath your everything basically. I wear that thing in the mountains like every single trip. Yeah. And then shout out. So yeah, shout out to that guy. And then quick little plug for myself. I make a little climbing salve called Boo Butter. I actually gave it to all the Everest guys this year. And so I've gotten a couple of local shops here at Tahoe. So hopefully I can sell enough to actually make some more next year.
And they're available in the Alpenglow office.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And it works too. I've been using it on a couple boo-boos and they're healing up nicely.
Oh yeah. All right, thanks, man. Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I started making it commercially. Well, commercially is a bit of an overstatement, but just because I thought it worked, so I was like, "Oh, it's cool. We'll show other people or give it to other people." Heal up them. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thanks so much for your time. It's been great chatting with you, hearing about your career progression and also your experience on Everest. And Adrian will work on your Wi-Fi for next time. That was in and out.
Wi-Fi was definitely way better on Everest than it is in Tahoe.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. You can follow along on Instagram, where we post our favorite clips from each episode, as well as more about the world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. catch you next time. And until then, we hope you enjoy some time outside.